Thank you so much for letting me come today. Like Anne said, I'm Haley Beard. I work at Children's Hospital Colorado, particularly in the Pediatric Mental Health Institute. My background though, I'm not a doctor, I'm a previous school counselor. So what I like to do is take the fancy lingo and amazing research that's coming out of that institution and translate it for parents so that we can have more of a accessible conversation when it comes to helping our kids. So today we're going to talk about fostering well-being and connection. When I think of these terms, super broad, right? But I like to phrase them more in how they relate to our kids' mental health as they grow and develop. So a few things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss how to promote well-being and resiliency in your kiddos and what really well-being and resiliency is. And then we're going to talk about ways that you can promote a positive connection as a parent with your youth. And then some strategies of how to engage in difficult conversations or navigate some road bumps that might potentially come up or some difficult conversations. But first, let's look at what is resiliency. So this came out of actually the University of Minnesota, and they created a well-being indicator tool for youth. Basically, what are all the things that are a part of what it means to be well or have well-being as you develop as a youth? And so we've got your environment, safety and security, relationships, mental health, cognitive health, physical health, community, purpose, all amazing things, right? And I think as a parent, this could either feel really good, like, oh, okay, I can compartmentalize the things that might make my kid well. Or this could be overwhelming. Like these are all the things that I need to touch on to make sure that my kid has well-being. But I think it's good to maybe set the stage, for what well-being means, because that can be a pretty broad term. When it comes to connection, resiliency, mental health, and that big well-being wheel, I like to look at it as they're all building blocks that build off of each other and create a more like support network. The connection at the core of it is supporting the development of resilience, which then is going to promote well-being and mental health. One thing I'd like to clarify, kind of a misnomer, resilience and resiliency does not equal traumatic events. So a kid does not have to go through trauma to then be resilient. A lot of times it's the resiliency that they already had at the core that helped them get through that trauma. And then another thing that's important is that mental health does not equal mental health disorder. We all have mental health, our kids all have mental health, just like they have physical health. So just clarifying a few things there. And then it's never too late to build connection, well-being, and resilience with our kids. So whether your child is 18 or 5, it's never too late to start these strategies. So we know the goal, right? We know that wheel of well-being, and we want to foster that with our child. But how do we get there, and why is it important? So we all know that stress is going to happen with our kids, to us as adults, whether it's daily, weekly, stress is going to come into our lives at some point. How we navigate it and how we respond to it is something that we can control, because we can't always control how often it pops up or when it pops up. So this graphic I like because when we have more severe, prolonged, unpredictable stress, it leads to some vulnerability. Whereas if we have patterns of stress that's more predictable, moderate, controlled in how we respond to it, we're going to then build resiliency. So it's important to remember that while we can't control for the stress that might pop up for our kids, we can control and model how they might respond or react to that stress to then improve their resilience. So how do we do that? I like to think of this concept called the window of tolerance. The window of tolerance is this optimal state of being. It is when we can access reason, when we can communicate, we're engaged, we're present, and have control of our body. Everybody's window of tolerance looks different, how big that window of tolerance is. I'm sure as I explain this, you're all gonna think of your children and which side of this graphic they fall on. But when that pattern of stress pops up, right, any sort of stressful situation, we have two kind of typical reactions when we're then getting out of our window of tolerance. So the first at the top is called hyperarousal. So that means that my heart is racing, like the tiger is chasing me, I'm anxious, irritable, maybe a little bit more impulsive, lack of attention and focus, really just kind of out of the body, not really feeling in control, can't calm down. Hypoarousal is our other side that is more that shutting down. I think of it as our kiddos who, when stress impacts them, they go into their turtle shell, right? They're withdrawn, isolated, maybe more tearful, numb, unmotivated. The hypoarousal is really where when stressful events hit, we're backing off. So either really feeling out of control or shutting down. The goal when we talk about strategies is we are wanting to increase or widen that window of tolerance so that when stressful events hit, we are able to get back to that optimal state of being. Because no matter what, we might get to hypo or hyper, but we want to make sure that we have the tools or our kids have the tools to get back to that window of tolerance and tolerate more for longer. So how do we do that as a parent, right? Two things. We're going to connect and we're going to respond. Conveying that it is okay to have and express those emotional thoughts or feelings of distress. That is all about validation, right? We've heard that before as parents. Biggest ways to do this are we're going to model these skills because we all as parents are experiencing stress and we have our own windows of tolerance. So we're going to model how we get back to that window of tolerance. And then scaffolding. So teaching these skills small bits at a time. And knowing that, and we're going to talk about the skills, but knowing that what works for you as a parent might not work for your child. And what works for one child might work differently for another. So finding the skills that work for each kiddo. And then co-regulation, which is my favorite skill. We're going to talk about that next. But being with your child as they calm down. And then really, when I think about the term coping skills, it's important and kids are learning about them, right? But it's almost like we're hearing about it a lot. And I think now our kids have this Rolodex of, okay, I'll take a deep breath. I'll go for a walk. I'll take a glass of water. And challenging, is that something that actually works for them, right? So this first skill is called co-regulation. And this is done with your child, not to your child. And so it's a shared experience, and it really relies heavily on those paraverbals or nonverbals. So making sure that we are getting down on their level when they're distressed. We are watching our facial expressions and our body language, making sure that our voice, our volume, our tone of speech is really rooted in that empathy. A lot of times when we're co-regulating with a distressed child that's out of their window of tolerance, though the way that we use our paraverbals is often way more important and way more impactful than the spoken words that we give them. So biggest thing to remember with co-regulation is that we want to be regulated first. So if you're feeling dysregulated when your child is out of their window of tolerance, taking a minute to make sure that you root yourself in regulation, when you're ready to step into helping them feel regulated too. Because if we sit next to them and attempt co-regulation and you're still kind of emanating that your distress, they're going to feel that, right? So making sure that you're rooted in feeling regulated first. So what are some tools and strategies? I'm sure some of you have seen some of these before, but when I think about both hyper and hypoarousal and getting back to that window of tolerance, I think of three different categories. So your breath work, movement, and grounding. Breath work, I think we hear, right? Take a deep breath. It's so important to get oxygen to your brain so that you can feel more regulated. But really, it's sending that signal to that child's brain, and as an adult, that it's okay to calm down. You're giving that oxygen is that refresh of, you can do this, you can calm down. There's a few different strategies that I like to teach to both kids and adults, but for our littles, belly breathing, I think it really is helpful to show that physical connection of inhaling and exhaling and watching their breath. Finger breathing would be taking your finger and making kind of as you go up and inhale and down and exhale. For some of our older, square and box breathing, I think is really beneficial because they can do it at their desks. It can be very nonchalant, for lack of a better word. And then bubbles or pinwheels would be really great for our littles too. Movement. This is giving your body the ability to release or channel energy. This is great for our kiddos that go more into that hyper arousal. This can be tough because I think a lot of times we think of big releasing physical energy as they have to be these big movements that everybody can see. But a few different options here would be teaching your kids to do a chair push. So having a seat and then they can take their hands and just physically release some energy by pushing a chair. Finger taps are also a really great strategy for channeling some energy. I know I can do that in some meetings that might be. My coworkers will call me out, they're like, you're tapping. And then also some large movements, right? So either large swings of our arms or our legs, and then dancing can be such a great way to release and channel some energy. And then finally with grounding, this can be a little bit harder for people because I think it's not as covert. So this grounding is connecting your body and your thoughts to the here and now. And a few different ways that we can do this would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is connecting us to our senses. So thinking about 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can taste, 2 things I can touch, and 1 thing I can smell. And it can be in any order that child wants it to be when we're connecting to our senses. But taking the time to think about where they are physically might get them out of that either hyper or hypo and back to that window of tolerance. All the grounding, I think, really is rooted in our senses and our strategies. So, our senses. So having conversations with our kids about how they can get back to the here and now is super important. Any strategy or coping skill that you go over with your child, there are 3 things I want you to remember. Active coping versus passive coping. This kind of gets back to what I was saying about our kids tend to have a Rolodex now of things that they've been taught when it comes to coping skills. So, okay, yeah, mom, I'll go take a deep breath, or okay, yeah, dad, I'll just go for a walk. But kind of challenging, is that what's working for them? How can they actively participate in their coping skills? And it's kind of that you can challenge us by asking this question of, are you engaging in this willfully or willingly? And seeing kind of where they're at there. We want to find intentionality with coping skills because at the end of the day, our goal is that our kids are able to do this stuff on their own. So when they're out in the world and they hit those stressful situations and they bump out of their window of tolerance, how can they get back to it? Second thing, baby steps. We're going to find out what fits. What fits for them at 5 might not fit for them at 8. So flowing with them and continuously practicing and talking about these skills and how they react to them. And then modeling. This is my biggest suggestion to parents is that we're going to model these skills and be overt rather than covert. So we want to not be super secretive about how we model skills and really just, we're going to model it and say, hey, you know, I was feeling super frustrated because I had a hard day at work today and I came home and I took it out on you, and I'm going to go and do some dancing or breath work or whatever it may be that works for you, and you're getting you back to your window of tolerance so that they can see, A, it's okay to have distress, and B, my parent is kind of practicing what might work for them. So modeling the skills. A few different ways that we can promote connection. I think I am sure all the parents in this room have kiddos at very different ages. So apply these in what way works for you at the stage you're in. But active listening. With active listening, sometimes we might think we are actively listening, but challenge yourself. Is your phone put away in silence? How is your body language? Are you physically turned towards your child as they are speaking? And avoid advice giving unless specifically asked for by your kid. And you can actually ask them, are you looking for my listening ear? Are you looking for me to give you some advice? Be present when we're talking to them, limit distractions. This is so hard, you guys. I'm a parent myself. We don't always know when interruptions are going to come. But are there times that we can schedule and make sure that we set aside, even if it's just 10 minutes, to find that connection? Because at the end of the day, it's about quality, not quantity. Celebrate individuality, which I'm sure all of you as parents are doing, but I think it's important to know the why behind celebrating individuality of our children is that we are promoting value, their value to our family and to their community. And it helps us give a connection to sharing experiences for them to tell us about themselves, but then for us to also share that back to them. Laughter and music. The reason why we put this up here is that this is a great opportunity for a reset button. We've all been there when it's 6 o'clock at night, nobody's eating the dinner that you made, it's been a crazy day, there's still homework and things to be done. But challenging yourself to just throw on some music, it really resets kids sometimes of like, what are they doing? But if we reset, then sometimes we can kind of get back to that window of tolerance for everybody in the household. And then building trust. This is consistent routines and boundaries, which again, the reason why we put this here is that this changes as kids grow. So what your boundaries are with your first grader might then look different for your boundaries with your sixth grader. And I think sometimes we get into this routine of blanket family household rules, but then challenging yourself to know like what boundaries and routines need to be differentiated for each child. So all those things are great, right? But what happens when we either have challenging topics that come up that we're maybe blindsided by that our kids might bring up, road bumps, any sort of thing that might come up that isn't in the great picture of things. How do we navigate that? And then what's our cycle of response? How do we avoid taking advice or best practices, doing it once, and then going into this chaotic swing? So how do we do that? So this is the 4R framework when it comes to response. Just similar to co-regulating, whenever we have a road bump or a difficult conversation that we're navigating with our child, it is very important to stay rooted in regulation. So we want to make sure that safety is the priority. Us as the adult is regulated first, and then we co-regulate with our child before we go into any sort of difficult conversation. And as the conversation continues to go, if at any point dysregulation happens, we go back down to that regulation because we know we're not going to solve any problems if that emotional dysregulation happens. Once that child is regulated, we're going to get rooted to our connection. How are we connected to our child first and leverage our relationship with them before getting to the reasoning? And this can be as simple as, I'm really glad you came to talk to me today, right? I'm really glad you feel like you can trust me with this information. Connecting back to your relationship with your child. Then, once we feel regulated and our relationship is established, we're going to apply language-based interventions. All this really means is that we are connecting to the developmental level of that child before going into, or as we go into the conversation. So thinking about their reasoning ability, talking through the issues, problem solving, what are they able to digest when it comes to this difficult conversation or this difficult topic. And then if emotional dysregulation happens at any time in the conversation, we're going to finish with repair. And that's just restoring the relationship if any dysregulation happened. So what is some sample language? So before we're scheduling a time to talk, the worst thing ever is when you are at work trying to get something done, you're on a deadline, and someone comes in wanting to have a difficult conversation when you weren't expecting it, right? So same thing for our kiddos. We're going to schedule a time to talk whenever there's a difficult conversation that needs to be had. We're gonna choose a place that feels comfortable and safe to them. Safety looks different, I think, from an adult brain to a kiddo brain. This could just mean that, they might always think that difficult conversations have to happen in the kitchen, and that might be not the environment they want to be in. So just asking them, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. Where would you like to have it? I think anytime we can give kiddos a little bit more autonomy can help in the long run. And then plan what you want to say. Go into this conversation prepared so that there's no surprises. And practice beforehand. This could be with a partner that you have in the household, running through with another adult, maybe a coworker, just, hey, I really want to have this difficult conversation with my kiddo about social media, dating, whatever it may be that's relevant to your family at the time. And just run through some of the talking points that you think that you want to bring up. During the conversation, we're going to be open, share honestly what you feel comfortable sharing, and really express what you need. Is this avoid dumping on your kiddo just your feelings, and what at the end of the day, what is it that is the outcome of the conversation that you're seeking? And is it advice, comfort, or just a listening ear? And I put this because this goes both ways. If the child is coming to you regarding a difficult conversation, are they looking for advice, comfort, or just a listening ear? And that is something that you can clarify with them. And then after the conversation, we want to open the door that we're going to keep this conversation going if needed. And I'm going to give you some sample language on this, but not only does this continue to establish the connection that you have with your kiddo, this opens that door for honesty. And then follow up if necessary. This, for things like maybe social media, saying, I'm going to follow up with you in a week about where you're at with this, can be really important so that we can continue to keep the conversation flowing. And then sharing resources. Sometimes if a kid needs connection to more research, or I don't want to say research, but just education on topics, there's so many great resources out there that are kid focused or even made by kids now. When it comes to mental health and difficult topics. So, sharing any connection to resources that they need. So in wrapping up that conversation, a few different ways that you could say it is, I'm really glad we talked about this. I'm proud of you for being open to discussing it, and I'm here to support you as we try out these new boundaries together. Let's make sure we touch base in a few days to see how the changes are going. I'm here to talk whenever you need. And our goal is to make sure you're feeling good, both mentally and physically. Let's check in after a little while and see how things are going, how we're both feeling about the changes we're trying. If you ever feel like you want to talk about something you're going through, I'm always here to listen. When it comes to difficult conversations, it can be about a lot of different topics. So wanting to keep this broad, but hopefully it's helpful when you think about how to wrap up difficult conversations.